I got as far as the doorway. I didn't.
Yeah, don't go in. This is a murder scene. Decapitation. It's an ugly spot.
Trudging through fallen leaves, officers approached a family's cabin under suspected reports of a headless body. The moment they stepped through the door, officers were hit with a scene so brutal, it left even the most seasoned among them stunned into silence. And it became evident to all personnel that whoever she was, this was no accident. The officers attending the property didn't know this yet, but they had just uncovered one of the most horrific crimes that Waller County had ever seen. And after making their way to the main building, well, they would discover several more disturbing details. And then it was up to them to piece together a story filled with rage, jealousy, and unfathomable behavior. Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at a horrific story. One that is known as the case of Jared Dicus or Anggy Diaz. And so, with that said, please do grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. Welcome back to Texas, land of white skies, bigger personalities, and the kind of history that's carved deep into American folklore. You might know it as cowboy country or the Lone Star State. And let's be honest, when you hear the word Texas, you know exactly what kind of place we're talking about. Because Texas is not just a state, it's a story and a legend, one that is built on horseback and held together by grit and gunpowder. It was once home to a wild and unruly era, one where cowboys roamed free, where saloons stood as gathering grounds, and where outlaws like Jesse James, Billy the Kid, and Butch Cassidy became icons of lawlessness. They hijacked trains, rustled cattle, and disappeared into the dusty plains, leaving behind many tales which were soaked in gunfire and blood. Fast forward to modern times, and Texas still hasn't quite shaken off its dark edge. With some of the highest homicide rates in the country, crime here does tend to cluster around its sprawling cities, and today we will be heading near one of them. Not Austin, the capital, but Houston, which is Texas' most populated city. A place where steel towers and crime stats are as high as their temperatures. But our story today does not unfold downtown, no. It begins roughly 50 miles northwest of the city, in a quiet corner of Waller County, and in a neighborhood called Oak Hollow Boulevard. It's a place that people move to when they want to get away from that urban lifestyle. And I mean really away. For example, there is only one store here, and basically not much else. It's peaceful, serene, and tucked far away from the chaos of the city. Which is precisely why, when a frantic 911 call came through on the morning of January the 11th, 2023, reporting a scene that would haunt even the most seasoned of officers, absolutely nobody was prepared for what they were about to find.
Waller County 911.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Rodney Dicus. I need an ambulance and police at so-called Boulevard. Please.
Okay, what's going on?
I don't know everything, but my son's wife is dead. Please.
Okay.
Somebody, please, I'll stay on the phone with
Okay, are you on location right now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I am. Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm here.
Where is he at?
He's in my house.
Okay, this is your
He's
house.
in their house. They have a building on my property. Oh my God, please send somebody.
No caller.
Oh my God.
Okay, what is your name, sir?
My name is Rodney.
All information we have right now is
Junior.
owner of the home walked in
This
and
is my
found the
phone.
DOA.
Okay, sir, just calm down. We're getting people en route, okay? And you said,
522, that's the again, it's going to be 206.
okay, and you said this is who to you now?
She's my daughter-in-law. She's my daughter-in-law.
Okay, it's a female?
Yes.
Okay, how old is she?
21.
Do you see anything by her, close to her?
I just sent somebody.
Medic 4, Tri-County Fire Department,
I
Medic
couldn't
4,
go all the
Tri-County
way
Fire
there.
Department.
Okay.
Oh my God, please hurry. There's something wrong with my son. Please hurry.
Okay. I'm getting him. I'm getting him in.
Please.
I'm sorry.
He has no weapons. He's in my house. He's laying on the floor crying. Please hurry.
Okay.
I'm gonna. Oh my God! I told him in the hospital to keep him. Oh my God! I told him that 2 days ago to keep him. Ma'am, I need
Yes, sir.
somebody.
I know they're coming. They're coming. I promise you, they're coming. Okay, just stay on the phone with me.
Jared, sit down in the chair, son. Get up off your knees and sit down in the chair. Just sit. Help's coming. It's gonna be okay, son. Just stay here.
Oh, I had him in the hospital 2 days ago. He was hearing voices. I told the doctor to keep him. The doctor said he was fine.
When deputies arrived at the 200th block of Oak Hollow Boulevard, they were met by Rodney Dicus and his wife, an older-looking couple who, at the time, were deeply disturbed by what they had just discovered. They told the officers that earlier that day, their son Jared had returned home, but something seemed off about him. He was more quiet than usual and just generally off-kilter. And as he made his way to the back of the property, which is where he lived with his wife, Anggy Diaz, he said something extraordinarily strange enough to make his parents deeply worried. Now, at first, they just tried to shake these comments off because maybe Jared was just having a bad day. But as the day dragged on, well, those feelings started to nag away in their stomach. And so Rodney, as curious as ever, decided to walk down to their cabin to make sure everything was alright. And it was there, on that stretch of land, that he found something so horrifying that it would stay with him forever. And, well, now you know what that 911 call was all about. When deputies arrived, they were met with a large rural plot of land, with weathered fences, scraps of timber scattered about, and a few dogs trotting freely around the yard. Found at the edge of the property stood a modest wooden structure, which looked more like a hut or a cabin than a home. You can see it quite clearly here in the footage captured from one of the officers' body cameras. And let's just say that what lay inside was worse than anyone could have imagined.
I got as far as the doorway. I didn't
Yeah, don't go in. This is a murder scene. Decapitation.
Inside the cabin, the scene that greeted deputies was nothing short of horrifying. The small wooden structure, which was barely held together by makeshift construction, was a cluttered and chaotic living space. The walls were unfinished, with exposed timber in some places, and no insulation or drywall in sight. An old air conditioning unit jutted out from a sheet of chipboard, and in the corner sat a grubby mattress perched on a crude improvised bed frame. But it wasn't only the fact that the cabin was crudely built, because on the inside it was an absolute mess too. Clothes littered the floor, discarded food containers and rubbish were strewn everywhere, and piles of junk were stacked haphazardly alongside the walls. It was the kind of place that looked like it had never known comfort, only survival. But still, none of that compared to what really drew the officers' attention, because what they found inside was a bloodbath. Tiny droplets of blood spattered across the timber walls, suggesting a violent, frenzied attack. In addition to this, the floor was smeared with dark, sticky stains, and found across the boards, bloody footprints tracked through the room. Lying beside the bed and almost swallowed by the shadows of the cabin lay the body of a young woman, and tragically, she seemed to be missing her head. And of course, it wouldn't take long for officers to confirm what they had long feared. It was the body of 21-year-old Anggy Diaz. Of course, the next big question on their minds was, who precisely were these two? While one was now quite obviously dead, the other was uncontrollably sobbing only a few steps away in his parents' home. Well, to better understand the violent murder of Anggy Diaz and the horrific spiral beforehand, we must first go to the beginning of their story. And so on that note, you better buckle up, folks, because this one, it is definitely an intense case. We begin our story in early of 2022, when Anggy and Jared would first cross paths. The way they met was both casual and unremarkable, at least to begin with. Trying to make ends meet, Anggy worked at the local grocery store named Cheap's Meat Market. At the time, Jared was a regular face there, and in a rural town like Oak Hollow, where there's only one store for miles and miles, running into your neighbors is kind of inevitable. Now, Anggy was only 20 years old, but even in a town filled with hard-working folk, she stood out quite clearly. She was bright, charismatic, and full of feminine charm. The kind of person whose smile would stick with you after you've left the checkout line. Now, Anggy has quite the interesting backstory, and that's because she had only recently arrived in the United States from Nicaragua. In the early days, she was staying with her aunt who, by coincidence or fate, would happen to live on the very same street as the Dicus family. Like many immigrants, Anggy had come here with a purpose. She would often work 2 jobs at the time, not out of ambition but necessity instead, because her goal was to help send money back home to help pay for her mother's cancer treatment. Now, despite having 2 jobs, Anggy would still find plenty of time for herself, which was especially pertinent in her fitness, a personal passion that she would often share through uplifting workout videos online. She encouraged other people to join her, tracked her journey, and kept a kind of digital diary that was brimming with motivation and positivity. And somewhere along the way, Jared noticed. Being roughly the same age as Anggy, what roughly started as a small talk between a customer and a cashier would slowly grow into something more. The two began to date, and according to those close to them, their romance seemed to move pretty quickly too. At least faster than anyone else expected. That is likely because Jared was absolutely enamored by her, and friends and family would say that she seemed to bring sunshine into his life. She was bubbly and joyful, and he was drawn to her optimism, and in turn, she seemed to brighten whenever he was nearby. Their engagement was incredibly fast though, and by October of that very same year, only several months after they met, the two got married. Their marriage was a simple courthouse wedding, and the vicar mentioned that there was nothing unusual about the couple. He thought that they were young, in love, and just eager to start their simple lives together. It was shortly after the wedding that Anggy moved into the small wooden cabin which was found behind the Dicus family home. As you've already seen, it was a small structure nestled at the edge of the property on Oak Hollow Boulevard. It was humble and secluded, and now it was home too. However, sadly, soon after the move, things began to change. Now, Anggy may not have known this at the time, but behind closed doors, Jared had actually been wrestling with substance abuse issues. Both drugs and alcohol were already a large part of his lifestyle, and unfortunately, this would only get worse over time. In fact, only 1 month after their wedding, in November of 2022, he was arrested for driving while intoxicated, and it wasn't just the DWI. According to police records, Jared's behavior while at the jail was volatile. He apparently threatened officers, punched walls and windows, and became so unmanageable that he even had to be restrained in a safety chair. So, it's safe to say that his anger wasn't only loud, it was dangerous too, and this is a very important thing to remember when moving forward. Although that particular incident did not involve Anggy directly whatsoever, those around her noticed a shift shortly after. The once cheerful woman began to arrive late to work, and her bright energy seemed to be dulled for one reason or another. She would at times share vague concerning comments about Jared to friends and co-workers, but would always stop short of the full details. Many of those who cared for her were left wondering how deep the trouble really ran. I mean, she was still smiling in public, but it did seem to be more forced and practiced. It was only 2 weeks before her death that Anggy posted a photo on Facebook of her and Jared standing in front of their Christmas tree together. You can see from this photo that they looked like any young couple, happily wishing friends and family a Merry Christmas. Jared commented beneath it to say, "Merry Christmas, my beautiful wife." He would even refer to her as his trophy, which some would say is quite the red flag. To many of those scrolling through social media, the two of them looked like a happy couple who were madly in love. However, those who knew her in real life were not so sure anymore. Moving forward, Anggy posted several more photos online, not only of her fitness but also of her and Jared. He would often respond to her posts with heart emojis and affectionate comments, and was very visible online, almost performatively so. Kind of like he was maybe trying to prove something to others. And, as we know, in private, something was not quite right. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Angie's manager Ruth started to notice that her performance had started to slip, and unfortunately, that was an understatement. Ruth wasn't quite sure what was going on for her newest employee, and so she decided that the two needed to chat. It was in that moment that Anggy finally broke her silence, and she admitted to Ruth that things were sadly not going too well at home. Ruth was actually surprised with how much Anggy had opened up. She would even confess that ever since getting married, Jared seemed like a totally different person. It wasn't just the enthusiasm or the kindness that had changed either, because apparently Jared was becoming increasingly jealous, and this deeply worried Anggy. And apparently, as it turns out, the police were not strangers to the Dicus property either, and were more than aware of the growing tension between the two. In fact, deputies had been called out more than several times to the property ever since their marriage, and all of these reports were tied to domestic violence. Now, despite being his victim, Anggy deeply loved Jared, and although she was desperately trying to keep the marriage together, he just seemed to spiral further and further out of control. You see, Jared was not seeking help, he was seeking escape instead, and the more that he leaned into drugs and alcohol, the more it seemed to blur the lines between reality, paranoia, and rage. It was only a few days before Angie's death that Jared's mental health seemed to reach some sort of new breaking point. It was at that stage that an overwhelming amount of anxiety seemed to grip him, so much so that he decided to dial 911. Now, in his own kind of weird and twisted way, this was Jared's desperate attempt for a cry for help, because, let's be honest, he quite clearly needed it. However, with so much drama happening between the two, barely anybody took notice. But even still, nobody, and I do mean nobody by the way, could have ever predicted with just how violently things were about to spiral.
Waller County 911.
Yes, this is Jared Dicus.
Hello?
Yes.
Waller County, go ahead.
I did a little bit of drugs and I need help. Hollow Boulevard.
Okay. Oak Hollow?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the problem?
I just don't feel well.
Okay, and you said you took drugs?
No, ma'am. I'm completely sorry. I don't know why I called.
Okay. And are you there by yourself? Is there somebody with you?
No, ma'am. My family's here with me.
Oh, your family's with you. Okay. Okay, so you don't.
Everybody's here.
Okay, but do you need an ambulance or no? Are you good?
I need an ambulance.
I got you. Okay, and how old are you?
I'm 21 years old.
21. Okay. Are there any gates or any animals on your property?
There's dogs.
Okay, can y'all put those up?
Yes, ma'am. They're inside.
Okay, I got you. Okay, Jared, I'm going to have the ambulance on the way, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
So, Jared, was it only a little hit or no drugs at all? Because that's at least what he would claim later on. And it is quite hard to take someone that seriously when they're calling the emergency services erratically not once but twice. It turns out that the ambulance did not turn up fast enough for Jared's liking, and so he would make a second call to them and plead for help yet again.
Who are you calling?
Well, County 911, what's the emergency?
Yes, this is Jared.
Hi, Mr. Jared. How can I help you?
Yes, I'm at Hollow Boulevard.
Yes, sir. We have EMS en route to you. Are you okay? Did something change?
Yes, ma'am. No, I'm not okay.
Okay, what's going on?
I did some drugs yesterday and I don't feel well. And I didn't do any drugs. I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have EMS en route to you.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
The root cause of these emergency calls do seem to boil down to Jared's growing insecurity of his relationship with Anggy. Jared felt threatened by her presence online and didn't appreciate her posts, interactions, or the attention that she was receiving. And considering Anggy worked in a customer-facing role where she was expected to be friendly and approachable to everyone, regardless of their gender, that friction between her and Jared wasn't occasional, it was constant. As a result of these things, Jared's mood would swing quite violently. He'd become spiteful, short-tempered, and increasingly aggressive. It was a clear pattern that seemed to be building momentum over time, and unfortunately, as a result, the cracks in their relationship were widening by the day. And these two phone calls would come only a couple of weeks before another far more chilling one, because as we already know, it would then be Jared's own father, Rodney, who would make the horrific emergency call when it was all too late. With the property now sealed off for investigators to look at the crime scene, they began to comb through every single detail available. Unfortunately, it was more than evident that she was already dead on arrival, and now all they could do was turn their attention to the cabin and all evidence left behind. And after taking a closer look, they realized just how brutal this story had become.
Alright, so where's the body?
So,
in there?
Yeah, if you step up on the third ladder, up there, you can peek your head in and see. I didn't get any further than that.
Up here?
Yeah.
As we know, the inside of the small cabin was drenched in blood, with stains found on the floors, walls, and furniture. In fact, from the sheer volume of blood alone, detectives immediately ruled out the idea of this being an accident or even a calculated murder. The violence and clumsiness told them that it was something else entirely. It was rage. When she was found, Angie's body was beside the bed, covered in multiple stab wounds, and she had been attacked in what they could only describe as a blind and uncontrollable frenzy. And nearby on the cabin floor, officers would find a bloodied kitchen knife which had been discarded carelessly, and was soon determined to be the murder weapon. However, there was one crucial thing missing to all of this, and I don't quite know how to put this lightly, but tragically, it was Angie's head. Which of course leads me to one other horrific question. Where was it? Now, thankfully, that answer would come soon enough. When officers decided to look through the rest of the cabin, they slowly made their way into the cramped bathroom, and there, at the basin of the shower, they found it. This was a discovery that would stop even the most seasoned of officers in their tracks, because, quite clearly, none of them were prepared to find a human head. In fact, apparently, most of them needed counselling after this. I mean, put quite bluntly, the entire crime scene was horrific, and would tell a horrible story filled with violence, rage, chaos, and absolute terror. So, I'm not surprised.
Blake said her head is somewhere else? In the tub? Okay. Okay.
I gotta wait to see. I need to get here.
Okay. Stay right here, Earl. Nobody goes in there. Hello, ma'am. I'm Deputy Lewis. I think I've talked to you at the door here a while back about maybe some dogs or something. No, your son's truck. Could I get your name, please, ma'am?
Lynn, Terry Lynn. He told me it happened this morning.
Who told you?
Jared.
Okay.
And he has been acting really strange lately. He called an ambulance on himself the other night and said he was on drugs, but I don't believe that he was. I think something's wrong.
Okay. Mr. Dicus? Randy Lewis, you remember me?
Oh, I know you.
Okay. I just need to get a little, I'm basically just identifying folks here.
Yes, sir.
Could I get you got your ID handy, or if you don't, you can just tell me. First full name?
Rodney. G.
With a G?
Yes, sir. G-E-N-E.
Dicus?
D-I-C-U-S.
And your date of birth?
Junior.
Junior.
Is that J.R.?
Yes, sir. Do you know these folks, Judge? Okay. Hell. Wayne, can we visit for a second? I got a question when you got time.
Yes, sir. Stay right there. Yes, sir.
Miss Angie, do you know what her last name was before she and your brother got married?
What's Angie's last name? Do you know? Her maiden last name. I don't know.
Okay. How about a date of birth?
Here's her phone.
So no fingerprints on it. Like, you know. Anyways.
That's all you know about her?
Yeah, I just know she worked over there. I know she was not here.
Where'd she work?
Chepis Meat Market.
The Cheppies?
That's where they met, yeah. I know she's here, you know.
Did she still work at Cheppies?
Yeah, yeah. I know she's not really a legal citizen, you know. I'm just saying.
I don't care.
No, I don't care either. I mean,
okay.
She's family, man.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. They said that the deceased lady and old boy that's in the back seat of Dion's car got married last September. Mm-hmm. And all they know is her name is Anggy, A-N-G-G-Y. But she works at Cheppies, or worked at Cheppies. So if she doesn't have any, I'm thinking, we ain't gone in there. Hopefully she's got there's some ID in there, but they could ID her if there's nothing in there. Jared.
Yeah.
Randy Lewis, you remember me?
Yes, sir.
You okay?
Yes, sir.
Jared, would you mind giving me the passcode to your phone? It's supposed to be a 6-digit code. Any more to it? And that'll open it up. It's not set or nothing like that. Just okay. Thank you.
After carrying out one of the most gruesome acts imaginable, Jared did not run or hide. Instead, he walked a few yards to his parents' home, collapsed on the floor, and cried. It was here that Waller County deputies officially placed Jared under arrest, obviously under suspicion of murdering his wife, Anggy. He was then taken into custody alongside his family, where all of them were then transported to the station for questioning. And as detectives began the grim task of piecing together what precisely happened inside that cabin, they would discover new details which only seemed to deepen the horror. Determining the timeline in this case would become absolutely crucial. They eventually calculated that Anggy must have been killed the day before Rodney made that harrowing discovery, which of course begged the question, what did Jared do in the hours that followed?
And I don't know if I told y'all, but Mama, when I was just visiting with Mama, she said, Jared told me this happened this morning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, if he's been in the house since 12:30, then they said he got home at like 4 a.m. So from 4 a.m. to 12:30 is our window of when this happened.
Well, in a community as small as Oak Hollow, it doesn't take long for word or suspicion to spread around. People notice things and people talk. And it didn't take long for investigators to hear from staff at Cheap's Meat Market, which was the very store where Anggy had worked, that they had actually seen Jared the following morning at around 11:40 a.m, which would have been hours after her murder. So you may be wondering, what precisely was he doing here? Was he maybe trying to give himself an alibi, or maybe buy some cleaning supplies? Well, the answer was actually neither. Surveillance footage paints a very different picture, one that's disturbingly casual. Jared, dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, is seen strolling into the store, walking up to the fridge, and then pulling out a beer. He then walks right out of the shop without paying. Outside, another camera catches him standing by his car. He then cracks open the can, takes a long drink, and then casually gets back into his vehicle and drives off. There is no panic or urgency seen here, just a man drinking a beer in the morning sun. Of course, after, committing one of the most gruesome murders that this town has ever seen. After being arrested, he confessed almost immediately. There was no lengthy interrogation, no drawn-out denials, and no hesitation to admitting that he had murdered his wife. Of course, this left very little doubt in the minds of the investigators. But to be honest with you, it wasn't exactly a mystery anyway, was it? Even without his confession, all the evidence available was confined and found in that tiny little cabin. Everything seemed to fit together like one of those easy 10-piece puzzles for children, and Jared never tried to cover up his crime, run from the law, or deny his guilt. Now, obviously, during the investigation, detectives were hard at work trying to find a motive. But officially, we aren't actually sure what that was. There are some people that believe that apparently Anggy rejected his sexual advances that evening, which sent Jared into an uncontrollable rage. But on the other side of the coin, there were people that were actually supporting Jared and said that he was never the violent type. But in a story like this, we must follow the facts, and the facts tell a very clear story. And it's opinions like those that do make you wonder, do any of us really know our neighbours? What we do know is that before Anggy's death, officers had already attended the property on numerous occasions, and all of these were centred around domestic violence. And so, whether Jared was under the influence of drugs or alcohol or not, it doesn't actually matter. The truth is, he had a violent side. Moving to the legal proceedings of this case, Jared's bond was initially set at $500,000, which is a hefty sum by any standard. But considering the brutality of the crime and his violent history, it wasn't long for prosecutors to push for more. An attorney stepped in, arguing that $500,000 simply was not enough, not for a man who had literally decapitated his wife in a fit of rage. And so, given the sheer brutality of the crime scene, it was officially raised to $1 million. Naturally, this all led prosecutors to question Jared's mental state. For example, was this the direct result of a mental breakdown or psychotic snap? Or did his true colours just finally come out? After a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, psychologists would unanimously rule that Jared was of sound mind. It is clear through his remorse and reactions that he understood what he had done. He fully understood what was coming next. And so, it was for that reason alone that he was declared fit to stand trial.
Tonight, a 21-year-old man has admitted to authorities that he decapitated his wife.
The disturbing murder happening yesterday near Magnolia. The woman's body was found inside a home on Oak Hollow Boulevard. Fox 26's Matthew Seedorf is in Waller County tonight, where the community is mourning. Matt.
There's a growing memorial tonight outside of Chepe's where this victim worked. Tonight you can see the flowers, the teddy bears, the candles. This woman loved in this community.
By now, the word of Anggy's murder had spread well beyond Waller County, and this quiet rural community that once prided itself on peace and privacy was now the centre of a gruesome national headline. The local community and people further afar were all shocked, horrified, and paying close attention to every legal update. And that wasn't only your every day-to-day citizen either. For example, even the judge who had officiated their marriage only 4 months earlier was in utter disbelief. But while the prosecution was busy building their case, something rather unexpected happened. And that is, in a moment of surprise, Jared officially accepted a plea deal. He had chosen not to hire a defense attorney, instead opting to represent himself. And through that plea agreement, he decided to waive everything, including his right to appeal the verdict, his sentence, and even any potential defense that might have been raised on his behalf. In response, Anggy's family would give their blessing for the deal to proceed, and so, without a lawyer, without a defense, and without a single appeal in his back pocket, he officially made his plea of guilty to the murder of his wife. On July the 31st, 2024, the judge delivered the final sentence. Jared was sentenced to 40 years behind bars, and furthermore would not be eligible for parole until the year 2043. That means that if he serves his full term, he won't be walking free until he's 63 years old. Now, they say that you only live once, and, well, for his crimes, he'll be spending most of it thinking about the irreversible pain he has caused, both to Anggy and to everyone who loved her. Now, of course, with tragedies like this, we are left with not only heartbreak, but many questions. Questions like, how did it get this far? And what could have been done to stop it? And in this case, the spotlight turned towards a deeply rooted issue, not only in the United States alone, but the rest of the world. And of course, I'm talking about domestic violence. In the aftermath of Angie's death, her family were faced with the unfortunate reality of not being able to afford her funeral. Of course, money was already tight to begin with. That was the entire reason Anggy was in the US. You know, it's very sad to realize that Anggy had been working 2 jobs to try to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. And now, in some sick twist of fate, all of that hard work had been undone to pay for her own funeral costs. In response, a GoFundMe campaign was launched by the public, which would in turn raise over $20,000 by friends, family, and strangers all moved by her story. The fundraiser described her as the light to her family and community. A small phrase, but one that perfectly captures exactly who she was. A candlelight vigil was held soon after at a park near her home. People arrived with flowers and handwritten messages, and all lit candles in her memory. Those who knew Anggy would say that words could never truly capture the kind of person that she was. She was said to be a very bright young girl who had many goals in life. And a neighbor recalls that no matter what time you walked into the market, and no matter how you were feeling on the day, her smile would seem to just light up the room. It is clear that Angie's death not only broke hearts, but left a lasting scar on an entire community. And if there is any small comfort to take from this tragedy, it is that the man responsible for her death did not get away with it. Jared now faces the full weight of the law, and whether it was guilt, remorse, or simply resignation, he chose not to fight it. He claimed a beautiful life from this world, and in return, he gave up the best years of his own. Now, maybe that's not enough, and maybe it never will be, but for those who loved Anggy, there is some peace in knowing that he will never have the chance to hurt anyone else for a very long time. This story has left so much pain behind wherever you look. In fact, just listening to Jared's own father on that 911 call is tragic enough. The man was absolutely broken. The twisted thing is, I don't think Jared even fully understands why he murdered his wife. I mean, his response both before and after the fact remains an enigma. So, will we ever fully understand why all of this happened? I'm not so sure anymore. Anyway, I think that pretty much covers all of my thoughts and opinions, but before I go, I'd love to know what you think about this one. To begin with, what do you think about Jared's sentence? Because at the end of the day, he only received 40 years. Do you think this was enough, or should he have received life? And how about the motive? Because to me, this sounds like a horrible mix of alcohol, jealousy, rage, and unchecked emotions. And of course a man who was unable to control any of it. But that's just my take. Anyway, what do you think? As always, let me know in the comments down below. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here today. As always, thank you so much for making it this far, folks. I really do appreciate you. I'll be back again very soon for another video in probably 3 or 4 days, so not too long. In the meantime, please do remember to look after yourselves and of course each other. Oh, and stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.